So I remember the first time I had sleep paralysis like it was yesterday. I was having a dream of a cat taking me to a place that I didn't recognize. He was yelling, "Find my body, find my body." Then as I woke up, in a great fatigue, I couldn't move and I see a kitten in my room. He climbs up on my curtains and he is up the window. I rush out of my room and told my parents. My dad goes outside to see a dead cat outside of my room. Tears came out of my eyes. I was so scared. No idea how I went to sleep that night. We moved from that house imminently, knowing there was a history of the house. My parents went as far as building a new house on their own. We now have a trail, a pool, a fireplace, and a big house. It was worth moving out. My husband and I were fighting. He pulled a 44 on my youngest son that was 6 months old at the time. I talked him to put the gun down. When he left for work, I packed my SUV and left for my parents' home that was 5 states away. I drove 23 hours to get home to my parents. I got home just fine. That day at my parents was great. I put my son to bed at 8 p.m., then I went to bed at 11 p.m. I could not sleep. I was crying over what happened in my marriage. I was sitting up in bed with covers around me due to my mom always keeping the house ice cold. Then suddenly I heard a sound in the closet. I turned and looked. The door closet opened. My eyes got wide due to there was no one else in my bedroom. Everyone else was sleeping. A large man in pinstripe overalls came out of the closet. He had no head. He was getting close with no sound from him. He got inches away, then he was reaching out to touch me. I pulled the covers up to my eyes but still was able to see him. I started praying. I spoke to the Headless Man. I told him that I could not handle him right now. And I went back to praying. The Headless Man stopped, turned around, and walked back into the closet and disappeared once he entered the closet. I told my mom the next morning. My aunt and my mom did some research on the house. Turns out, 75 years earlier, this was a farmland. The farmer's wife died, and his daughter also died of cancer. He was losing his farm due to medical bills. He walked into the barn with a shotgun and shot himself in the head. There were pictures of his family. The farmer was a large, pot-bellied man with pinstripe overalls on. The museum. This isn't ridiculously scary or anything. I was around the age of 7 when my family and I traveled to my hometown, Geneseo. We decided for the first time we'd try going to a supposedly haunted museum. It looked like a typical larger house on the outside, but it had a quite bit of history behind it. It was used as part of the Underground Railroad. In its basement, holes in the walls were used for former slaves to rest while traveling. However, this is not the area where my experience was. It was actually in a newer addition to the museum, a carriage room that was recently added on. This had been claimed to be unhaunted. For a bit of context beforehand, a relative of mine who works there had previously had a paranormal experience. While sitting on a bed, she felt a hand grab her shoulder forcefully. She was alone working the night shift. On our visit, we headed to the carriage room earlier on, eager to get to the more haunted sections. We began to move on, traveling down a flight of stairs. While descending, I felt my little sister Jane stumble down and bump into my backside and legs. I turned around annoyed, only to realize I was the last in the group. I knew I had felt the small body trip over me. However, due to my young age, the ridiculousness of claiming the carriage room was haunted and the fact that I wasn't good at telling the truth, I held my tongue. I decided to wait for a good amount of years before sharing my story with anyone else. There's my spooky story, the real deal. I have a story about my grandparents' house growing up. All of my siblings and my mom thought the house was haunted. It was my grandparents' house. So this one night, me and my sister are trying to go to sleep in the living room when the TV turns on by itself and she asked me to turn it off. So I did. Then the fridge opened by itself and the TV turned back on and we were all really scared to go to sleep, but we managed to get to sleep. The next morning, our mom picked us up and we told her what happened that night and she was just shocked until she told us that her grandma used to turn on the TV late at night, then get up and get something to eat from the fridge every night before she passed away. We were scared hearing that, and that's kind of why we don't stay at my grandparents' house anymore.